Her scream tore through the dry New Mexico air. Eliza Rowan's bare feet slammed against the hard-packed dirt as she stumbled across the open prairie. Her dress, once pale beige, now hung in shreds. A long tear exposed the bruises blooming across her hip and thigh. Dust clung to the sweat on her face. One eye was swollen red. The other carried a desperate fire. Behind her, hooves pounded closer. Her father had sold her like cattle. A drunken debt traded for his own survival. Now she was hunted by men who called her payment. Every step sent pain shooting up her side. Her breath came ragged. She tasted blood at the corner of her mouth. The land around her was merciless. Yellow grass bent in the hot wind. No tree, no wall, no escape. She prayed for one thing. Water. A place to hide. A miracle. Then she saw it. The crooked outline of Redwind Well rising from the horizon. Her heart pushed her forward. She ran with everything she had left, but her legs betrayed her. She collapsed in the dirt, crawling with torn hands, dragging herself toward the stones of the well. The sound of hooves grew louder, her vision blurred. She pressed her palm against her hip wound. Her dress darkened with blood. Eliza wanted to scream again, but the sound caught in her throat. Tears streaked through the dust on her cheeks. Her body trembled with fear. She whispered, half prayer, half curse. God, do not let them take me. And then a shadow fell across her. It was not the shadow of the daily outfit. It was broader, steadier. A tall man with great temples stepped forward, reins in one hand, a red bandana around his neck. His horse snorted and stamped the ground. The man dropped to one knee beside her. His voice was low, growly, calm. You are bleeding bad. He tore the red bandana from his neck and pressed it against her wound. Eliza flinched, her eyes wide with terror. Do not be afraid, he said. I am Silas Reed. You are safe now. Safe. The word felt foreign on her tongue, but as the hoof beats closed in, she realized this stranger had placed himself between her broken body and the men who claimed her. His jaw tightened, his hand stayed firm on the cloth against her side. And in that moment she wondered, could one weathered cowboy really stand against the dead of her father, the cruelty of the daily outfit and the lawless wilds of New Mexico, or would she still be dragged away into the darkness she had tried to escape? Silas lifted Eliza into his arms as if she weighed no more than a child. She gasped from the pain, clutching the red cloth tighter to her side. His horse snorted and shifted, but Silas calmed it with a quiet word. He carried her across the dry grass toward a weathered cabin at the edge of his ranch. The place looked plain and tired, but right now it was a fortress compared to the open prairie. Inside the cabin, the air smelled of leather and smoke. Silas set her down gently on a cot covered with an old wool blanket. He poured water from a tin canteen, his rough hands steady as he cleaned the dust from her face. Eliza watched him with eyes that mixed fear and disbelief. Nobody had ever cared for her wounds before. Not even her father. Silas spoke without looking at her. They will come for you again. His voice carried no doubt. They will not forget. Eliza's lip trembled. My father traded me like a sack of beans. She tried to laugh, but it broke into a sob. Silas did not smile. Some men lose themselves in whiskey. Some sell their soul, but you are not the debt. He tore strips of cloth from an old shirt, dipped them in warm water, and wrapped them around her ribs. Eliza winced, but she felt the trembling in her body ease. For the first time in days, she felt something close to safe. Silas ladled out a bowl of beans and cornbread from a cast iron pot on the stove. Eat, you will need your strength. She took it, her hands shaking. The taste of food almost made her cry. Every spoonful reminded her she was alive. Silas sat in a chair across the room, polishing the barrel of a Winchester. The lamp threw long shadows on the walls. From the doorway, Benji Cole peered in, dust on his cheeks. Silas nodded once. Ride to Juniper Flats. Find Sheriff Hayes. Tell him Vance Daly means to take a girl by force at Redwind Well at sundown. Benji touched the brim of his cap and ran for the corral. Finally, she asked the question that had been clawing at her chest. Why are you helping me? You do not even know me. Silas leaned back, his gray eyes steady. I have seen too many good folks broken by men like Daly. I will not see it again if I can help it. The room went quiet except for the crackle of the stove fire. Then a sudden thought cut through Eliza's mind. What happens when they come back? What happens when Vance Daly rides in at sundown? Silas laid the Winchester across his knees. His voice was calm, almost too calm. They will come, and when they do, I will be ready. But how can one man of 51 years stand against a gang that shows no mercy? And will Eliza's own father return to claim her again? Or will he leave her to face the outlaws alone? The sun was dropping low, painting the sky in gold and red. Silas moved slow but steady as he checked the rope he had strung near the barn gate. Eliza stood a few feet away, holding the old coach gun with both hands. Her arms shook, not from the weight, but from fear. Silas gave her a small nod. Do not point it unless you mean it. And if you fire, keep your eyes open. The sound alone will scare a man off. Eliza swallowed hard. She had never fired a gun in her life. Her father had once told her women should stay quiet and stay home. Now her very life might depend on breaking that rule. The ground began to tremble. Dust rose on the horizon. 2 riders, Vance Daly and his young cousin Nick. They came at a trot, calm and cocky, like men who thought they already owned the land they rode on. Silas stepped out from the barn and stood tall, his shoulders back, his face like stone. You came too soon, he said, his voice even. Vance laughed. You think a mule and a jar of coins make up for what your friend here owes me? He pointed at Eliza, his grin sharp. She is mine. That is the deal. Silas took one slow step forward. You will take the mule and the coins, and you will ride out of here. The girl stays. Nick swung down from his horse. Swagger in every step. You talk like you got a choice, old man. He reached for Eliza. Before his hand touched her, Silas yanked the rope. The barn gate slammed shut behind Nick's horse, spooking the animal. It reared, throwing Nick flat in the dirt. In one move, Silas looped his lasso and pulled it tight around the boy's arm. Nick cursed, kicking, but Silas let him struggle and then let him go. Next time, Silas said quietly, you might not walk away. Vance's grin faded. He spat in the dust and pulled his res. This is not over. Sundown at Redwin. Well, that is where we finish this. The 2 men turned their horses and rode off, leaving silence behind. Eliza's knees buckled and she sank onto the porch step. Her hands still clutched the coach gun. She looked up at Silas, her voice trembling. They will kill you. You cannot fight them alone. Silas lifted the gun from her lap and rested it by the door. I have stood against worse. But this time, it is not just me. You are here, too. The fire in his voice caught her off guard. For the first time, she wondered if the old cowboy might just have enough left in him to stand tall when it mattered most. And you listening to this story, if you want to see how it ends, make sure you follow along and subscribe so you do not miss what happens next. 'Cause it's sundown at the old red wine. Well, someone is not coming home. The sky turned deep red as the sun sank low. Silas rode slow toward Redwind Well, the old stone standing lonely against the horizon beside him. Eliza sat stiff in the saddle of his spare horse. Her father was tied near the well, rope around his chest. Yeah, his face pale in the fading light. Vance Daly leaned on the wooden post, his pistol resting easy in his hand. Nick circled like a hungry wolf, the knife at his belt, glinting. The air was heavy with dust and silence. Silas slid down from his horse. He placed his Winchester on the ground, then lifted his hands. The mule stood tethered to the post beside the well. A small coin pouch hung from the saddle horn. You got what you came for, he said. The mule and the coins are yours. Let the girl go. Vance shook his head slow. No, the deal was her. And I do not break deals. Eliza's breath caught in her throat. Her father looked at her with hollow eyes. He did not speak a word. Silas stepped closer, his boots grinding in the gravel. You take her. You got trouble not just from me. Sheriff Hayes will hear of it. And you know what the rope feels like around a man's neck. Vance sneered, his grin sharp. You think that old sheriff scares me? He grabbed Eliza's arm. She cried out, stumbling forward. In that instant, Tellis yanked the rope tied to the well crank, a loop hidden under the dust, snapped tight around Vance's leg. The outlaw cursed as he toppled to the ground, his pistol flying from his hand. Nick rushed in, pulling his knife. Eliza lifted the coach gun with shaking arms and fired into the sky. The blast roared through the dusk, echoing off the hills. The horses panicked, rearing and kicking. Nick froze, his eyes wide at the thunder of the gun before he could move. The sound of hooves rolled over the ridge. Sheriff Hayes and a deputy galloped into view. Rifles ready. Drop the knife. The sheriff barked. Nick backed away, his hands trembling. Hayes dismounted and grabbed Vance, twisting his arms behind his back. "You are finished," the sheriff said. "For kidnapping, for extortion, you are going to stand before the judge." Eliza ran to her father, cutting his rope with shaking hands, but he only looked down, ashamed, unable to meet her eyes. Silas picked up his Winchester and laid it across his shoulder. The fight was over, but the dust had not settled in Eliza's heart. Because even with Vance in chains, Nick had slipped away into the desert shadows. And every outlaw who vanishes into the night has a way of coming back. What kind of storm will return when Nick finds his chance to strike again? Night settled over Dry Willow Ranch. The outlaws were gone. Sheriff Hayes had ridden back to town with Vance in chains. Nick had slipped into the dark, but for now, the land was quiet again. Eliza stood by the old well, the fire light from the cabin flickering across her face. Her father sat a few yards away, silent, broken by shame. At last he stood, mumbled a goodbye, and walked into the night to start over. Eliza let him go. She knew some debts a man had to settle all alone. 3 months later, autumn laid a gold edge on the cottonwoods around Dry Willow Ranch. The morning smelled of coffee and saddle soap. Silas leaned against the porch rail, his hat tilted back. The red bandana tied once more around his neck. His body was tired, but his eyes were steady. The eyes of a man who had weathered storms and still stood tall. Eliza stepped closer. "You risked everything for me," she said softly. Silas gave a small shrug. "I only did what was right. A person is not property. You are more than a number in a ledger." Her eyes filled, not with fear this time, but with something new. She reached out and touched the old cloth at his neck. "If I stay by choice." Silas held her gaze for a long moment. Then he smiled, a rare, quiet smile that carried more weight than 1,000 words. They did not need promises or fancy speeches. Sometimes love in the West was not loud. It was steady, like the ground beneath their boots. The fire cracked, the horses settled, and for the first time in a long time, hope lingered in the air. And maybe that is the lesson we carry away tonight, that no one is defined by the debts of another. That courage can be found even in an old cowboy's weary heart, and that every person has the right to choose where they belong. So, what would you have done in Eliza's place? Would you have run? Would you have fought? Or would you have given up before finding someone willing to stand with you? If this story moved you, give it a like so others can find it, too. And subscribe to the channel so you will not miss the next ride into the Wild West. Because somewhere out there in the desert, Nick Daly is still watching.